Welcome to the Meeple Syrup Show. We're here with episode 121. I'm Daryl Andrews, one of the three hosts of the show. I'm also here with Sen Fong Lim. Say hi, Sen.
Hello.
And also Erica Boyoris. Say hi, Erica.
Hello.
And we're here with a couple wonderful guests. We have a really interesting topic, and I will mention them briefly, but before I do, we like to spend a minute or two just catching up the hosts. We have Gil Hova and Avonelle Wing. Did I say that right?
Yep, you got it right.
Woohoo! All right. But before we go chatting with them and mention the topic, I'm first going to pass the baton to Sen and say, what games have you been playing? What have you been up to lately?
What I've been up to lately? Really doing a lot of work on my own stuff. We got a bunch of expansions in the works still, coming out with new cities for Junkart. So the neat thing that we're doing with that is we're not releasing a whole box of stuff. We're going to actually be selling them sort of $5 at a time, little mini expansions off the goodies store from Plan B. I think that's the plan at Plan B right now, is to use that to drive kind of the smaller expansions that...
What's the Plan B for it?
The Plan B for the Plan B would be maybe someday to put it in a big box, but it's the kind of game that I think, you'll see a couple things and say, oh, 3 more city cards, I'll, buy that for, $2 or whatever. Whereas it's a big box already and heavy, so we thought maybe we'll just put out small little things. And the nice thing about how we can do it with the goodies store is that we can do really easy things to print, so nothing that's heavy componentry, like more wood pieces, but we can do cards and we can do chipboard and stuff like that really easily through that and just mail it out to people. So it's a different way of distributing the expansions for Junkart. And then we're working on Rock, Paper, Wizards and a bunch of other stuff that is like Secret Squirrel right now, but we'll get there. It'll be good. How about you, Erica? What are you working on?
Working on some stuff, but I can't talk about too much of it right now. But I can tell you what I've been playing.
Okay.
So I was lucky this weekend. I don't get a ton of time to play games, but I actually got to sit down twice, which was really, really nice. So got to play Downforce again, which was good, but I totally lost. Overbet in the first round. I got to play Las Vegas a couple times, and that was fun with the group I was with. Played, I think it's called 13 Clues. It's a newer one where you have it's interesting. It's like you're trying to figure out your own mystery, but you have a certain amount of exposed information, a certain amount of hidden, and you're asking each other questions. And then I played a really weird game with my son called Hop. Cute figurines, but I don't really get the purpose of the game. So
it's a bizarre game.
Yeah.
Yes. And my son is like basically 6, and there's no way without totally house ruling the beep out of this game could he even play this game. Like as an adult, I can like barely play this game. So
that sounds like a good topic for a show sometime, because I know Isaac Shalev has been asking, or maybe it wasn't Isaac, but somebody was asking on one of the design forums, how do we skew games for kids when they're playing against their parents and things like that, and should we? So that might be a neat topic.
Maybe like kid rules.
Yeah. How about you, Daryl? What have you been playing?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna laugh because I'm surprised that neither of you mentioned this, but I'm proud to get to mention that on the weekend I was hanging out at Mike's place for Path to Play, which is super hilarious that both of you are board members. But it was awesome. It was a great time. Anyone, just check out Path to Play, support it. We love it. It's a great thing. Actually, it's on topic, so we'll probably talk more about it later. But on the short side, what I got to play there, I got to play Sagrada, which I'm a little biased, but I like that game. And then I also got to play
Karuba.
Yeah, it's all right. And I got to play Karuba, which was super fun until Eagle Eye beat me. Yeah. And then I was like, oh.
Did you guys
got to announce
with like a lot of people on the cast as well? Like throughout the whole
well,
day?
it was a cool setup.
Yeah.
Mike has it all kind of like digitalized to play along and people can watch and stuff like that. And then real late night after dropping off Erica, we did a quick stop by to see Steven Sauer, and we played a little Bomb Squad Academy, which is a game that we love, that was designed by Josh Capel and Daniel Rocky. So just a little quick Canadian design game that we could squeeze in. So, I mean, enough about that, because we have some amazing guests and we want to utilize this time, and I know they could talk about this topic for hours. But I'm going to have Sen. Why don't you introduce the topic and introduce our guests?
Sure. So the topic for tonight is helping hands, and it really we wanted to talk about how we as designers and publishers, et cetera, can give back to the community of gamers, to the community of designers, and really sort of figure out. I think Avonelle, in our talk before the show started, mentioned the word citizenship and what that implies as a member of a larger community than just your little play group that you have at home. And so we brought Avonelle and Hova on to talk about this thing because, you know, the more and more we realize that we're together, we're better, that we have far-reaching, you know, concepts and abilities beyond just our local environment, and that, you know, designers have a little bit of, you know, pull into say, you know, how are we treating the people who are the consumers of the games, and how can we make that even better than we are doing it today? So Erica has a really good point. Let's talk about the word citizenship. So I'm gonna pass it over to
my muted point that you cannot read.
I can read it, except you typed it twice.
He's reading my mind. He's reading my mind, people.
So let's talk about that, and I'm going to pass it over to Avonelle because she's the one who brought the word up. Avonelle, what does the word citizenship mean to you?
So the point in my year where I use the word and express it to people in terms of designers and publishers giving something to the community is when I'm talking to people who want to demo their playtest at, or run a playtest or demo a nascent game at a double exposure convention. And Gil, as somebody who started out in our convention community, probably can also testify to this, that one of the things I found over the years is that people will come in and be like, I'm going to push market. I'm going to show people my game and they're going to love it because it's awesome. And they forget about the fact that when you connect deeply with a community, when you're a face that people are excited about, when you demonstrate that you're excited in their success and their gaming experience, when you have a Kickstarter, when you sign a game, when you're shopping to publishers, they're really excited to talk about what you're doing. Being a game designer creates, and being a creative creates a certain amount of celebrity that I encourage people to use judiciously and to turn around and make sure that when they're engaged in a convention setting or a retail setting, something where they're outside of their own play group, their own home community, that they are engaging in the experiences of the people around them, bringing positive energy to the table, bringing a good attitude, taking care of things right, bussing the table at the end of a game if people have been sloppy and left things sitting. All of the things that go along with existing in a space with other humans, making sure that the quietest person at the table gets a chance to talk, making sure that if you're all playing games together and one person keeps trying to take somebody else's turn, you go, oh, hold on. I think we're all equipped to take our own turn here. So let's wait and see. And doing the stewardship of a table, of a group of people, of a conversation, to make sure that if you've got a notch of celebrity because you've designed a game or because people are excited that you're there, that you apply it broadly for everybody's benefit.
Yeah, that's pretty Spider-Man. That's like great power, great responsibility.
That was really nicely said.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks very much. Gil, what do you think? I mean, Avonelle had a great description. Being part of that community, how did you see it from your point of view when you started out at the Mediatopia scene in New Jersey?
Yeah, when I started out, I mean, it was just friends, you know, because at that point I'd already seen a bunch of people together, and you know, I wasn't really seeing competitors. I wasn't seeing competition. I was seeing friends who also had cool games, and it's hard to not be rooting for them. I mean, technically we're in competition, but I don't really look forward to the day when it feels like a competition. You know, I want to root for everyone else. You know, when people like Erica and Sen and Daryl get games signed, I want to cheer, you know, be like, yeah, that's awesome. My friends are doing great. And I think as the business grows, we're going to start to see, we might start to see people treating this more as a business and treating this more like, okay, I can get ahead by cutting down the people next to me. And I worry about gaming getting big enough that it's going to have its Bill Gates moment. You know, somebody's going to take all this goodwill that we built and monetize it all for themselves, you know, by some pretty harsh zero-sum tactics. I don't think we're there yet, and I hope we're not there for a long time.
Yeah, good stuff.
That's
Well,
a scary thought.
Scary.
I know, right? Yeah.
But totally plausible.
We got to know what we're working against a little too, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's important to identify. And I want to kind of continue that question over to Avonelle. Could you tell us a little bit about, you know, some of the things that you see that maybe some people are ignorant to or don't understand, are problems with our hobby, and maybe even we'll start pointing to some of the solutions. But I think before we can really get there, we need to be honest with ourselves and evaluate, you know, where some of our weaknesses are and where we have opportunities to grow.
Sure. So I'm going to start at a really high level, and it's going to sound very academic for a moment, but I'm going to drill down very quickly to something that's approachable, which is that gaming communities are often people who have been circumstantially marginalized. They're smarter than their peers. They had bigger vocabularies. They were kind of weird. They were into D&D. They played games as kids instead of being a sport. Often, that in any 10 sit down and talk to, some number of them identify as having been marginalized socially in some way or another throughout part of their childhood, their adolescence, their young adulthood. So one of the things that I see happen is that these people get into a situation that is time outside of space. Either they're at a game store surrounded by people that are like them, or they go to a convention and all of a sudden they've found home. They've found a community, people that are like them, that think like them, that get their references, that keep up when they reference Lord of the Rings, who knows what a trick-taking game is and doesn't need it explained to them. And instead of being like, oh, we found utopia, let's make this the right world. What they do is, without thinking about it, they replicate dysfunctional power structures that exist in the outside world. The most boisterous person in the room is the person who gets the attention, the person with the biggest personality, the person with the most resources. And so what I see is that instead of upending and challenging all the isms that we face in the outside world, gamers have this unintentional, unobserved tendency to replicate damaged power structures and to vie to be the top fish, the biggest fish in the pond, or the top dog, whatever mangled metaphor you want to put in there. And so one of the things that I've observed over the years is that if you have conversations with them and say, you know, this is kind of weird because you were the weird outside kid and now you want someone else to be the weird outside kid so that you can be the celebrity, so that you can be the cool kid, so that you can be the one with the name recognition. And all of the problems I see with, you know, gaming conventions having a reputation of being a wall of white that's kind of hard for a person of color to break into. All the issues I have with hearing about neuroatypical players getting shut out of the game table because the way the conversation flow excludes them, or disabled gamers having a hard time at the game table, or women getting talked over and explained to and heaped at the table. All those things are part of that same systemic dysfunction being replicated in unobserved ways. And so a lot of the conversation I have about how to give back and how to be a good participant in the community is to stop and observe those effects and make sure that you're editing them out of your game table, making sure that the most fragile person at the table, the most vulnerable person in the room, is the person who has the most agency.
I'd say that's really important, really powerful. I guess what another really nice thing to think about is that there might be people at the ground level who can start to hopefully kind of help out some of these issues. And when I was going to throw something over to Gil, because Gil, you work a lot of your booths yourself. Like, yes, you have playtesters, or sorry, people that help you out, but you work a lot of your booths. You do tons of playtesting. So as somebody who gets to see a lot of behavior, maybe we can emphasize some of the positive things that you've noticed gamers do at tables that could almost kind of equip people when they get into these scenarios where they meet these really negative gamers or negative people in this industry, that they can kind of have some sort of way of coping or something in their toolbox, if you will, to say this might be a good way to help the scenario, help the issue.
Honestly, it's tough to pick up in a demo. I mean, when I demo, a lot of times, people aren't that invested in it, and you don't really see that extra competitiveness come out. And honestly, these days at booths, I let my my demo weasels, that's what I call my booth staff, my demo weasels handle the demoing. And that way, they can really focus on just giving the best demo they can. And if somebody has a quick question, if somebody wants to buy something, then I handle that transaction. That way, they don't have to worry about any of that extra stuff. Ideally, that's how I have it set up anyway. So I don't do a lot of demos myself at my booth. And when I play test instead, it's a very different crowd. The Magic Circle is very different when you're play testing as opposed to playing regular games. And when I play regular games, I have people over my apartment, so I've already curated the group. So honestly, these days, I don't really get to see a lot of I'm going to use the word unusual behavior, because just in between my curation, my circumstances, that's kind of edited out. But I've done it in the past, I've seen it a lot in the past, and it's hard. I mean, I have to admit, most times when that behavior happens, people just sort of let it go and let it happen. I think that's the common experience, because it's hard to challenge someone. It's hard to confront someone and tell someone, hey, you're out of line. And I've learned to do it. I mean, look, I've noticed that this is, it's what I've seen in the past, because I've folded in the past. When that's happened in the past, I've just folded like a tent, and just been like, okay, I'm just going to let it pass, because
it's hard to be confrontational, right?
Yep. But I think as I've built capital and I've built experience and I've seen what my inaction does, I've seen my inaction negatively impact game groups and realized, hey, this really is the worst case scenario. I've started speaking up, and, it's uncomfortable at first, but short term, more comfortable, long term, much, much better, because that player, maybe I'm just being optimistic, but so many times that player doesn't realize what they're doing. And when I tell them what they're doing, they'll be like, oh, no, I'm sorry, totally didn't mean that. And then they catch themselves, Sometimes you have the more malignant players that, well, I don't really care. And those are players that you curate out of your game group, and those players just don't have a place where you play. As an aside, I think as I've moved from playing in public spaces to playing in private spaces, that really helps the curation. When you have people over someone's house, you're less likely to see that really aggressive/transgressive behavior. But when you're playing in a public space, when you're playing at a convention, it's just a total wild card. You have no idea what you're going to get.
I think it's kind of a badass superpower that you have the ability to normalize turning into someone and saying, hey, that wasn't cool, let's cut that out. Because you have a little bit of status to throw around, you're able to make it okay for the next person in line to be like, oh, if Gil can do that, and Gil has overcome his shyness about that, now I can do that, and I can practice what I just saw Gil do. And normalizing those behaviors is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. You've used this term in the past, and I love this term, Av. It's using my cloak of privilege, and I think that's great. Like wearing it like a cloak and shielding other people, and I think that's a really good way to use it. So taking my reputation and taking my experience and saying, you should be careful about that. And there's still times these days where I slip up. I'm tired. It's been a long day at the convention, and I'm gauging my emotional capital. And there's one game I had at Origins where in retrospect I would have not blown up, but I would have really been aggressive against like one player who was being totally unpleasant and one player who wouldn't have deserved anything. He was just like flipping his cards, which is like a personal button, but not really a huge transgression. And it would have been like I would have unloaded on both of them and way more than they would have deserved. So I tried to calmly bring things up and as best I could. And then when that didn't do much, I just removed myself from the table as soon as I politely could and be like, you know what, I don't have the energy and I don't have the juice for it. And I think that's also a question, like what happens if you just don't have the juice? Because this does take some element of emotional capital. And especially in a convention setting, you're not always going to be running on full.
Right. No, that's a good point. And Avonelle, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about tools that you can use so that it is open. It is, here's how we're going to set the game up from the get-go. These are things we do allow. These are things we don't allow. We don't do that around here. What other types of tools are there? All that kind of stuff. But before I get to that, or before you get to that, because you're going to be answering the question, I just wanted to say, I mean, we talk about this in school all the time, right, Erica? We talk about upstanding. Upstanding being the act of standing up for somebody, especially when doing nothing is easier.
Yes.
Right? And that's
we raise each other up rather than tear each other down. Yes.
Right. And so I think that kind of thing, we learn it in the public school setting. We teach it in the public school setting. Why can't we bring that out into the convention world or the gaming tables, right? So, excuse me, back to Avonelle. I wanted to talk to you about tools. I know of things like the X card. What other types of things are there? And could you explain the X card again for our listeners? Not all of them are role-playing gamers, so.
Sure. So the X card is a tool that started out in the story game community. It was actually formalized by John Stavropoulos. And what it is you put a index card with an X on it on the table, and you explain to the table that if conversation or a topic in the game just is over the top or uncomfortable or untenable, you reach out and touch the card. And the table agrees, the social contract at the table is that conversation, that train of thought, that plot line just stops. You don't have to explain why it's a problem. You don't need to say, I'm triggered by this. You don't need to have a further conversation. And so it was kind of one of the baseline, beginning, rudimentary tools in the story game RPG community for how do I curate a conversation? How do I make it clear that some things are okay at the game table and other things aren't? Because gaming is so contextual, and the socialization at a gaming table is how close are you with these people? What have you already agreed to as standards for the community? There are a bunch of new tools there. I will drop links into the sidebar if you want to post them later. There's something called a support flower that was developed by the Games to Gather group in Portland that is the X card, but also cooler in that, like, it's the next generation. It's the granddaughter of the X card, in that it has green spots that you can tap to say, I like where this is going, more of this. And so if somebody's being a really gracious player, for example, let's take it to a board gaming table. You've got the support flower on the board gaming table, and someone's just being really gentle with the one player who's having analysis paralysis and is just, I don't know what I'm doing and I need some help. You can tap the green section of the support flower to be like, hey, I see you. I see that you're doing a gracious and good thing. If something starts to slide into an accidental, let's say someone opens their mouth, gets stuck halfway, and doesn't know how to get their foot back out of their mouth without falling over, and you have the table suddenly embroiled in one of those moments where a racist joke keeps going because the person doesn't know how to shut up graciously and say, hey, that was stupid of me. Someone can reach out and touch the red part of the flower and be like, nope, full stop. Just stop talking. We're done. And so it allows the community to edit those social contracts in a very real-time way. It works really well at an RPG table, but I've also seen them work really well in conversation groups. The other thing that I really advocate that everybody make a habit of doing until it becomes so completely normalized that nobody notices is when you sit down at a gaming table, One, if you're at a convention or a retail shop or somewhere in public, a library, gaming group, a meetup, introduce yourself. Don't assume that everybody knows who you are. Don't assume that everybody is so neurotypical that they're going to remember your name if they've met you 100 times. And then my pronouns are she, her. If you give your pronouns and then go around the table and encourage other people to introduce themselves, it normalizes it for trans players that then they are not having to themselves constantly by saying, hey, that's not my pronoun.
Mhm.
Players that if somebody at the table is getting misgendered, you just use a sign language P, and everybody at the table then again with the right pronoun, and there's not a big deal made. The person who is most marginalized at the table, ever so slightly safer.
Yeah, and then they don't have to do the emotional.
So those are
labor,
kind of
right?
my 3 current favorites.
Those are great.
And they don't have to actually have the nerve, what Gil was saying about not being at peak capacity. How many times, much easier is it to do this and be like, than to challenge somebody every time it comes up. And it diffuses the energy and the responsibility around the table. Anyone can pull the pronoun P and be like, let's back that up. And the responsibility for the table is to normalize the fact that you don't flail, you don't make big apologies, you just say, oh, sorry, Gil, I was talking about his blog. And yeah, it takes that emotional labor off the person that's being misgendered.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Amazing tools. That's some of that I'm just learning about. I love it. I love it. Talking about learning and resources, I know for myself, someone that I appreciate and love learning from is Gil. You've done some great writing, and I want to highlight a few of them and go from there. But I'm everything from I recall reading about invisible ropes and talking about things like how many women did I get to play games with recently, and all these kind of great questions that I think really elevate our community and have us having some really great conversations. Could you talk a little bit about your blog and some of the stuff that you've written that people have been resonating with?
Well, I mean, it was something I wrote in 2014, so I feel like I've been slacking lately. Like I haven't written a lot on the subject lately, but it's still something that really opened my eyes and was really important to me. Because before then, I don't really feel like I, as the kids say, was woke. I don't really feel like I knew what was like I knew what other people were going through. I figured that everybody else was pretty much having the same experience as me. And I wondered if, well, there aren't a lot of women designers. Well, I wonder why that is. And at the same time, saying things like the only kinds of games that are valid are strategy games. So I didn't exactly say that in those words, but that's really where I came from mentally. And what this project did, I was just curious because I was working on one particular project, and the publisher, a publisher that I once worked with, wanted a male to female ratio in representation of 3 to 1, and I wanted 1 to 1. So, but they said, well, I've noticed more men than women playing, and that I realized I didn't have any numbers to back up. And at the same time, there's a lot that's problematic about that argument, but we'll get to that another time. But so I figured, what, let me get some data. Just who do I play with? I knew it wouldn't be universal. I knew it wouldn't be the kind of thing that would be the kind of thing that would speak for everyone. It would only speak for me, but it would be one data point. So for the whole year of, I think, 2014, I logged, with all my plays, I logged the genders of people I played with. At the time, I only had one non-binary person that I played with, so I didn't have, unfortunately, a big data set for that. I think things are changing now, and more people are willing to be open about not being either male or female, which I think is great. And I'd like to see, I'd like to see more people get comfortable with that. But at the time, I just broke it down into male and female. And what I found is 26% of my opponents were women. But if I was playing an unpublished game, if I was playtesting, then that number dropped to 17%. But if it was published, it rose to 31%. If I was in a public space, the number dropped to 21%. But if it was in a private space, then the number jumped to 31%. I started seeing these patterns, that generally in the design world, I tended more male, and public spaces tended more male, whereas published and private tended to allow more females, although nothing close to 50-50. And as I was doing this project, I started noticing the things that women were up against. When there was only one woman at the game table against 3 men, and seeing the men explain the rules to her when she already knew the rules, assuming that she didn't understand the strategy. Even the whole idea, the whole experience of walking to a game store and everybody else, like, you're the only woman, everybody else is male. How must that feel? I mean, if I were in that position, I realized I would probably feel pretty uncomfortable. And already there are these small microaggressions that that a lot of women in gaming have to deal with. And I realized that's one reason why the number tended to go up in private settings. And so, with these numbers, I wrote about this, I tried to socialize it and put it together and say, there are things that we could be doing that could make women more welcome at the gaming table and make women more welcome, hopefully, as designers. And I feel like we're starting to turn a corner, because I'm starting to see more designers that are women break into the board game space, and, like Erica, becoming published. And I think that's great. And I think it's a perspective that's valuable. And to circle back to an earlier point, I think board gaming is starting to get a little more accepting of games that aren't just I beat you. And I think as we allow more narratives than the regular standard male narrative, we're going to be seeing more kinds of games that aren't just I beat you, but that have more kinds of competition, more kinds of play. And so if we're not just stuck into this regular, stuck into the strategy world, this world of strategy games, I think we'll get to see all sorts of flavors rather than just one.
A lot of really awesome information there. We're going to see if we can give a link to everything Gil was talking about. I think at one point Sam might have had some of the stats up, but I'm not sure if you could see them. Avonelle, can we get you to comment kind of on that? There is a juxtaposition between these two spaces, that almost private versus public space. And I guess the big question becomes how to, merge the two, or kind of whatever that feeling is, whatever that safe zone is, can we apply that to a grander setting, like a convention? And for example, you've got Metatopia. How do you kind of create that welcoming umbrella around it?
So I just want to tangent real quick and comment that one of the things I learned this year is that the more mainstream game community has a lot more women designers, but they don't credit their designers on their boxes. So like Hasbro doesn't list the designers of their games, but there are women out there with tremendous dossiers of published game credits that just don't get acknowledged because they're not in the hobby gaming market. And
Jenga.
Yeah.
Jenga, Quirkle,
Set.
all sorts of games. Yeah. Monopoly.
Yep. So that's worth mentioning, is that I feel like there's some amount of celebrity being allocated differently in the hobby market by how we interact. And so the designer name is more important. Whereas if you think of it as trad publishing, the mainstream market has almost a textbook effect where there aren't necessarily names on the fronts of textbooks, but there's a lot of them and people just don't get the same credit. Mm-hmm. As far as making public space safe in a way that private space is, I think that the more we empower people to say, hey, we don't do that here. I dropped a link to a blog into the internal behind the scenes. There's a fantastic blog. If you Google for the phrase, we don't do that here, the more that we're able to say, nope, no jokes like that. No, we don't single out the person who is most awkward, or, nope, we don't make fun of people's accents or lists. I think that teaching the community to collectively edit our norms so that the process raises everybody's boat. I think too, just having these conversations, right? I was super validated by Gil's research because God, do dudes hear it better when it comes from a dude. And so Gil's saying, we have a gender balance problem. Look at these stats. Women don't like playing with randos in public. And I can prove that because here's the stats that show that they aren't playing with me in public. Made it much easier for me to have these conversations because I could be like, I'm not telling you this. Gil is telling you this. Go look at Gil's blog. And so that's a really interesting effect where, again, like Gil said, encouraging people to use their cloaks of privilege. And I use two different metaphors. One is you have boxes of privilege. If you're going to be on a soapbox, bring somebody up with you. But also, if you have privilege, shelter other people with your privilege. Be the one to say, we don't do that here. Or we do that here, right? So as much as we're talking about the negatives, when somebody does something really awesome, like speaks up for somebody else, or says, hey, that's not cool, or could we not? Having a table of people that go, thank you for saying that. I was thinking it. Or I really appreciate that you just stood up for me. Validating each other and modeling that behavior of appreciativeness for those behaviors ends up being really key. And if a designer is using their status for someone else's benefit and to be a good citizen, when I see a designer bust the game table when they're done, everybody's had their Chinese food and there's junk all over the table, and somebody who could reasonably strut out going, I'm kind of a name, I'm kind of a deal, who stops and throws out the trash and picks up the water bottles, I'm like, oh, I could just hug you. Because it models to everybody else that is appropriate, acceptable, expected behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You need that collaborative effect to kind of keep the snowball rolling, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks like we lost Gil, so
no, I'm here. I'm here.
What
my video is not working for some reason. Like I was in a freeze frame.
Oh.
I turned my camera off and I turned it back on, but the ferret seems to be here. But I'm here.
We like the
and that
ferret.
was a cute ferret.
It is a cute ferret. Yes.
Yes. Are you finally going to make me a stuffy ferret so I can buy it for my kids?
I'd love to. Someday.
I would
Money,
back that on Kickstarter, buddy.
Oh, it's all cash.
So I know, good stretch goal. Let's talk about. So we've identified what citizenship is. We've identified some tools to use. What are some of the things that we as game designers ourselves can do to enhance this sense of citizenship? To get people recruited into the field? What are some of the things that are happening around projects that you see out there? Gil, I'm going to go to you with this question. What can we do actively?
I think the first part is start to internalize it, and start to have it come from you. Don't do it because it's a thing you have to do. Do it because it's a thing you do. It's the right thing to do. All the stuff really comes down to not being a jerk. The problem is not being a jerk is complicated. It's not easy. It's not straightforward. And they don't teach you that in schools. In fact, frankly, in schools, they teach the opposite. They teach you how to be a jerk. They, in Av's great terms, they create this power structure. They introduce you to this power structure with the one with the loudest voice wins, the one with the most friends wins, the tallest, the strongest, the loudest, the meanest, they all win. And that's not a power structure that really is going to be healthy or helpful for us. So, all these things, I can imagine some people like listening to it and saying, oh, this is just a bunch of hippy dippy stuff. But it's really not, because all it comes down to is these are the instruction manual. This is the instruction manual we should have gotten as kids about how to not be a jerk, how to pay attention and know when somebody is feeling bad. I mean, look, there's going to be times in life where we have to make people feel bad because of something they're doing is not right. But a game convention generally is is a place where people want to have fun, you know, and you don't want to have, it's not a zero-sum thing, you know, it's not the kind of thing where I can only have fun if you're not having fun. That's not the way this works, and it should never be the way this culture works. You know, this is more of harvesting thing where if I'm having fun, you should be having fun. You know, if we finish a game and everybody's miserable except the player who won, and the player who won said, well, I had a good time, that's not good. That's bad. That's really, really bad. And I've had games like that, and I didn't have the vocabulary back then to understand exactly what went wrong. And now I'm understanding, no, that was a bad game. So I think internalizing it and understanding like what the point of all this is, you know, it's really ultimately not being a jerk, and that not being a jerk manual, like just not coming to us when it should have, coming to us. I mean, for me, late in life, I'm 43, you know, I mean, and I'm just learning this stuff now. It's kind of sad, but I mean, I'm glad that I'm getting a chance to exercise it and try it out, and hopefully socialize it and get other people on board, and make sure that, you know, when people play games, they all do it in an optimal environment where we all can have a good time. And there's going to be a little short-term awkwardness as we make sure everybody gets considered. You know, so that said, what can we do? You know, pay attention to the people who need attention. You know, this isn't the kind of thing where you're going to be treating everybody equally. You know, if there's somebody who needs some sort of special, okay, I don't want to say special treatment.
Accommodation.
Thank you. That's the right word. That's a better word.
Right?
That's a better word. Yeah, exactly. Like, compare it to, like having a gluten-free friend over. You know, when you have a gluten-free friend over, you're not going to say, okay, well, we're having pizza because we have pizza every week. Well, for me, that's not the case because we still have pizza. We just go to a pizzeria that does a really good gluten-free pie. But, you know, the point is, that's a situation where you don't want to treat everybody the same as you treated everybody else. You're going to accommodate, you know, your gluten-free friend. And at the same time, at the same way, you're going to be, you know, trying to make sure that your neuroatypical friends are included, that your non-binary friends are included, you know, and they might require accommodation that you're not used to. Might require muscles that you're not used to using. But at some point, you know, when you use them, you're going to wind up with a really good game group and some really good gaming experiences.
Well, and I just want to chime in here that game designers have the ability to literally change the world.
Yeah.
Game design is a media, just like music, just like TV, just like movies. It is a media that connects people in real time, in real space. And having the ability to use language that is gender inclusive, being able to make design decisions that your women are all going to be reasonably clothed, or if you have any half-naked women, you have half-naked non-binary and dudes in there too. Being able to make the decision that you're going to have a rainbow of skin tones, and you're not going to have all of your monsters have dark skin tones, and you're going to make sure that there's a disabled person for every X number able-bodied people in your representation, in your art, in your language, in your descriptions, in your examples. All of those things are a superpower that game designers possess that is underutilized. You have the ability as designers to change this world, and many designers choose not to use it because they don't understand how it works.
Absolutely.
Or don't realize they have that power.
Yeah.
Right. This is a great segue. I want to point out Eric Lang, I think, is a great example of a designer who tries to leverage his influence to elevate the conversation and help the community. An example, I think, that I think is really relevant to this topic is he tweeted during the Game Developers Conference. I'm going to read the tweet, but I would love to hear your response, Avonelle, and maybe even point out other ways that designers can leverage their influence to continue to change the world and help our gaming communities. But first, let me read the tweet. Sadly, this tweet caused a lot of negative reaction. I want to clarify that because for many of you, you may hear this and not understand why people reacted that way. But this is the tweet, and then there was a backlash. So he wrote on Twitter, literally right at the end of giving a seminar about choosing a career path in game design, he wrote, "Women and minorities, if you're talented, passionate, and interested in game design as a career path and have talent, come see me." And then he gave a location of where to meet him. because he wanted to connect. Could you give us a little bit of a response of if you're familiar of when that kind of backlash happened, and then also again point out some other ways that designers can help?
That backlash happens every time someone speaks up about the fact that women and minorities are disprivileged in any nerd circle, whether it's comics, whether it's game design, whether it's attending gaming conventions. There's a backlash because people who, again, have replicated dysfunctional power structures don't like the hierarchy being challenged. There's always going to be somebody who's like, that's affirmative action, and affirmative action takes away from me. No, affirmative action rebalances dysfunctional systemic issues. It doesn't take away from one person. It helps other people. So when I heard that Eric was getting flack for that tweet, I was sadly completely unsurprised.
Yep. Sad times.
Eric is working with Meeple, who's Lone Shark Games, on an inclusiveness initiative. That initiative, it is basically looking at business-to-business level mentoring to help game design studios, publishers, manufacturers to be better about including people who are not the core demographic. And so I think they're doing some pretty awesome work.
Mm-hmm. And
that's awesome.
If you want to, if you're listening and you are a person of color or minority, marginalized in any way, shape, or form, definitely, reach out to myself, Erica, Daryl, and if you know Eric as well, Gail. And, I think there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to see, how can we make this a better place? How can we make game design and gaming a better place? And I know Meeple and Eric are working on something that Avonelle just talked about, and we can help you get to that person who's doing the work if you don't know them yourself. So reach out to us, of course.
Gil, is there anyone you want to give a shout out to that is doing kind of offering the same thing or trying to promote people in the right way?
I mean, the first person I can think of is Av, here's another good group of people. The IGDA had a mentorship program.
IGDN.
I'm sorry, IGDN. Thank you. Had a mentorship program at Metatopia, and they were kind enough to appoint me as a mentor. So I helped out a game designer, a very good game designer named Victoria Kana. Kana? I don't know her last name. But Kana. Yeah, Kana? Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. She has this game about betting on fighting gladiators. That's really good. And it turns out I had played it a few weeks before, and I gave some feedback on it, but it was really good. And it was just such a pleasure to make sure just to bring her into the convention and tell her that you belong here. This is where you need to be right now. And I think organizations like that, between an organization like Double Exposure and the new Cred Bureau, and which also Av is involved with, and as well as organizations like the IGDN, I will not screw up their name again, trying to get more people, get more kinds of voices in the mix, and I think showing people that they belong here, I think is very, very useful.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And one of those things that's happening right now, if you are a game designer who is marginalized and feels like you have something to offer that people just aren't listening, there's ways to get that voice heard. And one of them is through a scholarship that's being offered by Jelly Bean Games up here in Canada. Peter C. Hayward is the person behind that, and he's actually Australian, but we won't hold that against him. Avonelle, you were involved in consulting on that. Can you tell us a little bit about the scholarship and how it's done?
What it does?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what it is it's designed specifically for women or women identifying game designers who have a game that is ready to be play tested. And so you have to have a board game design, and they are sponsoring 3 months with Cardboard Edison, where you turn over your game. They play test it, they give you feedback, and then you turn around and play test it again. And you get 3 sessions of that so that you can take advantage of all. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. So that you can take advantage of all the wisdom that Cardboard Edison and their playtesters have available to you. Cardboard Edison does this. Chris and Suzanne regularly work with game designers. And so what Jelly Bean Games has done is arrange for them to do this for free for 3 months for a woman board game designer that is ready to kind of kick her game design process up to the next level. And so one of the things I really like about this is that it presumes a certain amount of core competency as a game designer. It doesn't, there's no spoon feeding. There's no assuming that you don't know what you're doing. It's assuming that you're a game designer who has some chops, who needs access to resources to move on to the next stage. And I really like the validation of that. And I like the fact that they have a bunch of different ways that you can enter the scholarship. You can email, you can send a video. And they've taken into account the fact that influence the war against women picking up game design as a hobby or as a set career. And so they've taken into account the fact that you might not to a 3-month schedule. They're prepared to work with a game designer. And so I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, and you can see here on the screen that I'm sharing, you have to submit an application below in the form of a video no longer than 4 minutes.
Or in the form of a video.
Yeah, and then send it to the the link to contact@jellybean-games.com or -games.com, sorry. And then the application information's on their website. They're due by December 31st, 2017. The winners will be announced in early 2018. And that's kind of it. That's
Don't tell yourself no. If you're listening to this and you thought to yourself for even half a second, maybe I should sign up for this, don't be the one to tell yourself no. Let them tell you no. Go ahead and sign up. If you aren't chosen this time, they're going to keep a list. I'm going to be in touch with people. I'm going to be connecting people with other resources. This isn't the end of the line, and don't talk yourself out of a possible success.
Yeah. We really want to encourage anyone like you just heard. I mean, let's have the problem of lots of people applying, and we will look forward to the opportunity of dealing with that. There's a lot of people that want to get involved, and so if there's lots of interest, that just means we get to pour more and more.
20 applications should win. Yeah. That leaves us with a much better problem. Always come up with resources to provide additional support to additional designers. But if no one shows up to the party, that's a very sad party.
Yeah. So we need that. We need people stepping up, and actually that actually ties into another kind of question that I want to point maybe to Gil. I don't know anyone else. Maybe there's a few other people that are watching this series, but there's a series on AMC called The Secret History of Comics going on, and they just had a wonderful episode a couple days ago called The Color of Comics. I highly recommend checking it out, and it's actually a wonderful documentary episode, focused by Robert Kirkman, where he really brings up the conversation of people trying to address different races and different heroes, and we heard earlier as well, Avonelle talking about us having examples that we get to create this world, and we get to interact with the worlds that we're creating. So I'm curious. I'm going to kind of put the spotlight on you, Gil. How do you see designers doing a better job? Shine some light on some examples that you see where people are really helping our communities and making games that are better or moving it at least in the right direction.
I think representation has a lot to do with it. I mean, when you have a game that just has yet another white guy on it, on the cover. I mean, you're sending a message. It may not be an intentional message, but it's a message of who you expect to play your game. You know, when your male to female ratio is 3 to 1, you're sending a very firm message. And again, it may not be intentional, but it's the message is sent regardless. So when I see companies like Fantasy Flight, like really making sure that they represent women and minorities on their covers, you know, I think that's really cool. When I see companies like Jelly Bean making that game design scholarship, that's a great example also. You know, I when I see what I think One Deck Dungeon, you know, was a card game where all the characters were female. I thought that was amazing, you know, and of course it created a backlash. But I mean, that's going to happen. This is a boat that has been asking to be rocked for some time now, and I'm happy that it's being rocked. I'm happy that we're asking these questions, and I'm happy that we're starting to see that some of these unconscious assumptions that we've made might be keeping possible gamers out, and that to me is really bad. I mean, you know, on a very superficial and simple level as a publisher, I don't like it because it's fewer customers. But on a much deeper moral level, I just don't think it's the right thing to do. You know, I think the right thing is to bring as many people on this boat as the boat can hold. You know, why limit it to just one group?
That sounds like a game already.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like lifeboats.
Definitely. It's too bad we're running out of time. You know, there was one more point I wanted to make, but I don't think we'll have time for it. I know you wanted to toss one more question to Avonelle, so let's go to that right now.
All right. I guess I'm trying to think what we haven't. Well, the last thing we were going to talk about at some point was just treatment of playtesters. You wanted to make a little bit of a note of that. I'm assuming, Avonelle, based on some of the things you've seen yourself at Metatopia. So maybe just a quick showdown on that, because I know it was something you wanted to touch on.
So more than anything, I wanted to, so going back to being a good citizen, game designers who remember that playtesters are performing labor and are participating in the process, and who heap gratitude and appreciation and credit their playtesters, I think is really important. When I sometimes have playtesters after Metatopia who come back to me and are like, so I have no idea who was in such and such session. Can you send me their names? And I'm like, no.
Mm-hmm.
No. You write that down, you stay in touch, and you make sure that they feel like you appreciate their involvement in their world. And if you are playtesting with somebody who has a game or has a concept, water them, nourish them, bring them along with you, pile them on the boat with you.
Right, that's a great point. One of the things you said again before the show was put your community before your own design, and I think that kind of just even that simple phrase makes you really think about, what am I doing this for? What am I getting? You know, yes, there is a benefit to me to being in this community, but if I want this community to continue to exist, I do have to nourish it. I have to bring people up, and if I'm the highest person in the hierarchy of this community, it's my responsibility to raise people up instead of keeping them pushed down. Gil, how do you do that in your design community? How do you raise people up?
The first thing is play their games. You know, again, there's a selfish angle to it, because I feel like by playtesting somebody else's games, I keep my design chops sharp. But again, it's the right thing to do. You know, it's a quid pro quo thing. Don't go to the playtest group, expect to play only your games, and then walk out. You know, you have to give back. And that's how you create a scene. That's how you nourish, and that's how you keep the plants watered. I remember when I was in my small playtest group, you know, it was just like 10 people showing up, and 2 of the people had these banners that they put on the tables, and I'm like, why are you putting the banners on the table? You're not demoing the game to us. We're testing the game. You know, it maybe at some point, you know, we'll become champions of your game, but for now we're testing it. We're beating it up. We're going to give you feedback and, you know, hopefully make it a better game. And it just wasn't the time to treat us, because, you know, when you sell a game to someone, there's a little bit of distance there, and playtesting requires a little more intimacy than that. So, you know, bring the intimacy in. It might mean leaving the marketing materials at home. A playtest is not a demo. You know, a lot of people confuse those two. So you're not demoing your game, you're playtesting it. And that means you have to be ready to receive feedback, be willing to accept that people will have constructive criticism for your game, that there are ways that they can see it get better. And obviously that criticism may not be what's right for your game. They may be envisioning it going into a game that's their vision may be different than yours. That happens all the time in playtesting. But let them say it. Don't shut them down. You know, say that's a good point. Write it down, and you don't have to implement it. Just make sure that they know that they're being heard. You know,
don't fight with your playtesters.
Yeah,
ever.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. It's a question of being gracious. All right, so that was it. Thanks, guys, so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Daryl's gonna wrap now.
Thank you.
Not like
Go wrap it, Daryl.
No, sadly, I do not have the rapping skills that maybe some people are hoping from that, but I do.
Send beatbox.
Yeah, Sen's got the beatbox skills. You can tune in when he's DJing. When he's doing some DJing, ask him to do some beatbox or doing some of his game raps. There was a lot of fun over those too. You can look them up. But to close, I do want to say a special thank you. Thank you, Gil. You have always been a good friend and also a good ambassador for our community and for games. And I appreciate your example. I appreciate you asking tough questions and encouraging the community. And also, Avonelle, I just want to say a big thank you. This is our first time actually meeting in person, but I did want to, I wanted to save this for the end, but I have never had anyone in this game community spoken about more highly than you. Lots of people praise what you do, and I just want to say thank you. It's a true honor to meet you and keep doing what you're doing. You're really making a difference. So.
Please, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, very cool. So I guess that's it for the show, right, Daryl?
That's it. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Keep making some great games. We look forward to trying your game soon. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.